Anunnaki, gods of heaven or visitors from the stars. What if the stories we've dismissed as myth were actually fragments of something larger, something real? Tonight, we begin with the Anunnaki, those ancient beings described in clay tablets older than pyramids, older than written history itself. Picture the moment when the first cuneiform stylus pressed into wet clay 5,000 years ago. The scribe's hand moved with deliberation, carving not just symbols but preserving voices from an age we can barely imagine. These weren't fairy tales or simple creation myths. They were detailed accounts, genealogies, and chronicles that speak of beings who came from the sky, who shaped humanity, who walked among us before disappearing into the silence of deep time. The word Anunnaki itself whispers across millennia, those who from heaven to earth came, in the twilight between day and night, between what we know and what we wonder. This phrase carries weight that transcends mythology. It suggests arrival, descent, purpose. Modern archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of thousands of these tablets scattered across ancient Mesopotamia, each one a voice calling from the past, each one asking us to listen more carefully. Consider the consistency of these accounts across cultures that had no contact with each other, from the Sumerians to the Babylonians, from the Akkadians to the Assyrians. The same names appear, the same stories unfold, the same sky gods govern the same cosmic order. Anu, the father of heaven; Enlil, master of air and storms; Enki, keeper of wisdom and the deep waters. These weren't abstract concepts, but specific individuals with personalities, conflicts, and purposes that shape the course of human civilization. Science tells us that memory can survive in unexpected forms. Genetic memory encoded in DNA, cultural memory passed through stories, even geological memory preserved in rock layers and isotope signatures. What if the Anunnaki myths represent another form of memory, not genetic or cultural, but species memory? The collective recollection of an encounter, so profound it echoed through generations like ripples in still water. The tablets speak of advanced knowledge that seems impossible for their time. Detailed astronomical calculations, precise mathematical systems, medical procedures, metallurgy, agricultural techniques that shouldn't have existed in the dawn of civilization. Modern scholars explain these as gradual developments, natural human innovation. But what if they were remembrances? What if someone was teaching? In laboratories around the world, scientists peer through microscopes at ancient clay, analyzing the mineral composition, the firing temperatures, the microscopic traces of plant matter and human touch. These tablets aren't just containers of text, they're time capsules, preserving not just words but the very moment of their creation. The clay came from specific riverbeds, mixed with water from particular sources, shaped by hands that lived and breathed, and wondered just as we do. Tonight, as we drift between certainty and mystery, we hold space for possibility. We don't have transcended their individual lifespans. Skew to believe, only to consider. To let your mind wander through the corridors of what if, where the boundaries between myth and memory blur like shadows at dusk. The Anunnaki may have been gods, they may have been visitors, they may have been aspects of our collective imagination made manifest in story and stone. Or perhaps they were something else entirely, something that defies our categories, our need to place everything into neat boxes of real or unreal. The ancient Sumerians lived under the same stars we see tonight, asked the same fundamental questions about origin and purpose, felt the same longing to understand their place in the vastness of existence. Their answers, preserved in clay and whispered across centuries, suggest that we are not alone, that we never were alone, and that somewhere in the spaces between myth and reality, between memory and dream, truth waits patiently to be discovered. And as we close this first chapter, we find ourselves at the threshold of a deeper inquiry. If these beings were real, if they truly walked among our ancestors, then what evidence might remain? What traces would such an encounter leave in the archaeological record, in the stories we tell, in the very fabric of who we are? The clay remembers, even when we forget, and in that remembrance lies a mystery that modern science is only beginning to understand. Tonight we turn our attention to the medium itself, the clay that has preserved these ancient voices across an ocean of time, holding their words like amber holds prehistoric insects, perfect and untouched by the passage of millennia. Mesopotamia, the land between rivers, was built from clay, not metaphorically but literally. Every brick, every tablet, Every vessel that held water or grain or oil came from the same source, the rich alluvial deposits left by the Tigris and Euphrates as they meandered toward the sea. Modern geologists studying core samples from this region have discovered something remarkable. The clay that forms the foundation of Mesopotamian civilization contains mineral signatures that can be traced to specific watersheds, specific seasons, even specific flood cycles that occurred thousands of years ago. When a Sumerian scribe reached for clay to create a tablet, they were handling material that had already traveled immense distances through time. Silicates and feldspars eroded from mountains hundreds of miles away, organic matter from ancient forests, microscopic marine fossils from seas that existed long before humans walked the earth. The clay itself was a repository of deep time, compressed into a medium that would preserve human thoughts for future millennia. The process of creating a cuneiform tablet was both practical and sacred. The clay had to be exactly the right consistency, moist enough to accept the impressions of the reed stylus, but firm enough to hold its shape. Too wet, and the symbols would blur. Too dry, and the clay would crack and crumble. Scribes developed an intimate relationship with their medium, understanding its moods and possibilities the way a musician understands their instrument. Recent archaeological analysis using spectrographic techniques has revealed that different scribes preferred different clay sources. Some traveled considerable distances to obtain clay with specific mineral properties. Others added organic tempering agents, crushed shells, plant fibers, even ground bone, to create tablets with particular characteristics. These weren't random choices but carefully considered decisions that suggest a deep understanding of material science. The firing process transformed these clay memories into permanent archives. When tablets were deliberately baked in kilns, the molecular structure of the clay changed irreversibly, locking the cuneiform impressions in place. But many tablets were preserved by accident, baked by the fires that destroyed the libraries and palaces where they were stored. Paradoxically, destruction became preservation, catastrophe became gift. Modern laboratories can now determine not just when a tablet was created, but under what conditions. Thermoluminescence dating reveals the exact temperature at which clay was fired. Isotope analysis identifies the geographic source of the raw materials. Microscopic examination shows the pressure and angle of stylus strokes, sometimes even allowing researchers to identify individual scribes by their distinctive writing styles. The content of these tablets ranges from the mundane to the cosmic. Administrative records sit beside epic poetry. Shopping lists share space with astronomical calculations. Medical prescriptions are found next to creation myths. This mixture isn't random but reflects the integrated worldview of ancient Mesopotamian civilization, where the practical and the sacred, the earthly and the celestial, were understood as different aspects of a single, interconnected reality. Among the thousands of tablets discovered, those describing the Anunnaki hold particular fascination. They're not isolated texts, but part of a vast, cross-referenced library of knowledge. The same divine names appear in different contexts, sometimes as characters in mythic narratives, sometimes as planetary bodies tracked by astronomers, sometimes as archetypal forces invoked in medical treatments or agricultural rituals. The famous Enuma Elish creation epic, preserved on 7 tablets, describes the cosmic battles that established the order of heaven and earth. But it's written in the same meticulous cuneiform style used for recording grain distributions and tax collections. This suggests that ancient Mesopotamians viewed their creation stories not as abstract mythology, but as historical records, as factual accounts of events that really occurred. Clay tablets from different periods show the evolution of Anunnaki narratives over time. Earlier Sumerian versions emphasize their role as active participants in human affairs. Later Babylonian texts describe them as more distant figures, ruling from celestial realms. Akkadian translations introduce subtle but significant changes in meaning, suggesting that even ancient scribes were interpreting and reinterpreting these stories for their own times. The preservation of these tablets wasn't accidental, but reflected a deliberate effort to maintain cultural memory across generations. Scrabble schools created multiple copies of important texts. Library catalogues were maintained. Cross-references were carefully noted. This systematic approach to knowledge preservation suggests that ancient Mesopotamians understood themselves to be custodians of information that transcended their individual lifespans. Tonight, as we consider these clay messengers from the deep past, We're struck by their dual nature. They are simultaneously fragile and indestructible, temporary and eternal. A tablet can survive for millennia, then crumble to dust at an archaeologist's touch. Yet the words it carries, impressed into clay by minds that thought and wondered and dreamed, continue to speak across the vast silence of time. In the quiet of this moment, we can almost hear the scratching of reed against clay, the whispered words of scribes working by lamplight, the careful pronunciation of divine names that were old even when first carved into the eternal memory of clay. And in that scratching, that whispering, something stirs, a recognition that these weren't mere stories, but testimonies written not only in clay but carved into stone, built into the very architecture of ancient cities, encoded in the massive ziggurats that still rise from desert sands like prayers made manifest in brick and mortar. When archaeologists first excavated these towering structures, they assumed they were temples, places of worship dedicated to abstract deities. But closer examination revealed something more intriguing. The ziggurats weren't built as monuments to distant gods, but as functional structures, platforms, landing places, meeting points between heaven and earth. Their design follows principles that seem to anticipate arrival from above, accommodation for beings who moved between terrestrial and celestial realms. Consider the Great Ziggurat of Ur, its massive foundation still impressive after 4 millennia. Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed that its construction required precise mathematical calculations, advanced knowledge of structural engineering, and organizational capabilities that stretch our understanding of Bronze Age civilization. The builders didn't simply pile bricks into a pyramid shape, but created a complex, multi-level structure with internal chambers, ventilation systems, and access ramps designed for purposes we can only speculate about. The orientation of these structures provides another layer of mystery. They're aligned not with cardinal directions or solar phenomena, but with specific stellar patterns, constellations that held particular significance in Mesopotamian astronomy. The Ziggurat of Babylon, described in cuneiform texts as the house of the foundation of heaven and earth, was positioned to mirror the celestial arrangement of stars associated with Anu, Enlil, and Enki, the divine triad of the Anunnaki pantheon. Modern archaeoastronomy has revealed that these alignments weren't casual, but reflected sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics. The builders tracked not just the obvious movements of sun and moon, but the subtle precession of stellar positions over centuries-long cycles. They encoded into their architecture a kind of cosmic calendar, a stone record of astronomical knowledge that parallels and sometimes exceeds what we find in their written records. The scale of these projects defies easy explanation. The Ziggurat of Babylon required millions of bricks, each one molded, fired, and transported to the construction site. Ancient texts describe work crews numbering in the tens of thousands, organized with military precision under the direction of master builders who possessed knowledge that seems almost anachronistic for their time. Where did this expertise come from? How did Bronze Age civilizations develop such advanced understanding of mathematics, engineering, and astronomy? Excavations have uncovered workshop areas around these sites where artisans worked with materials that shouldn't have been available in Mesopotamia. Bronze alloys requiring tin from distant mountain regions, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, gold worked with techniques that suggest access to sophisticated metallurgical knowledge. The logistics alone, organizing trade networks spanning continents, developing quality control systems for materials, coordinating the work of specialized craftsmen, implies a level of administrative sophistication that challenges our assumptions about ancient capabilities. The iconography carved into these structures provides another piece of the puzzle. Relief sculptures show beings that are clearly humanoid, but subtly different, taller, more elongated proportions, distinctive facial features, often depicted with wings or other attributes suggesting their ability to move through different realms. These aren't stylized representations of ordinary humans, but careful artistic records of specific physical characteristics, preserved across centuries with remarkable consistency. Recent analysis using digital reconstruction techniques has allowed researchers to create three-dimensional models of these structures as they would have appeared when newly built. The results are startling. These weren't crude monuments, but sophisticated architectural achievements that rivaled anything built in the classical world. Their surfaces would have been covered with glazed tiles, creating intricate patterns visible from great distances. At night, fires burning in their upper chambers would have made them visible across the landscape, beacons connecting earth and sky. The function of these buildings becomes clearer when we consider them not as temples, but as infrastructure, the physical framework supporting interactions between human civilization and something else. The texts describe regular meetings, formal protocols, established procedures for communication and collaboration. This wasn't worship but diplomacy, not religion but relationship. Archaeological evidence supports this interpretation. Storage facilities large enough to hold vast quantities of goods. Workshop areas equipped for manufacturing on an industrial scale. Administrative offices with elaborate record-keeping systems. These sites functioned as centers of activity that transcended their immediate geographic regions, nodes in a network that connected local communities with larger patterns of influence and authority. The decline of these structures correlates with changes in the textual record. Later periods show reduced architectural ambition, simplified building techniques, loss of specialized knowledge that had been carefully maintained for centuries. It's as if the expertise required for these massive projects gradually disappeared, leaving behind only the ruins and the memories preserved in cuneiform tablets. Tonight, as we stand in imagination before these ancient monuments, we feel the weight of questions that resist easy answers. These structures represent enormous investments of human energy and resources, created for purposes that remain partially hidden from our contemporary understanding. They speak of relationships, connections, purposes that transcended the ordinary needs of Bronze Age communities. In their shadows, other questions stir, about the watchers who guided their construction, about the sky that held such careful attention so focused, so mathematically precise, that modern astronomers studying ancient Mesopotamian observations are still discovering the depth and sophistication of their celestial knowledge. The night sky above ancient Sumer was not the dimmed canopy we see today, washed pale by electric light and urban glow. It was a theater of countless stars, a moving map of divine order where every celestial body carried meaning, every astronomical event held significance for earthly affairs. But the Mesopotamian approach to astronomy transcended mere observation. It represented a systematic effort to decode the language of heaven, to understand the messages embedded in cosmic cycles. The Enuma Anu-Enlil, a massive astrological compendium comprising over 7,000 omens, reveals the extraordinary scope of Mesopotamian astronomical knowledge. Modern translations show that ancient observers tracked not only obvious phenomena like eclipses and planetary conjunctions, but subtle variations in star brightness, minor perturbations in planetary orbits, and long-term cycles that required generations of continuous observation to document. This wasn't primitive stargazing, but sophisticated data collection, organized and systematic in ways that anticipate modern scientific methodology. Consider what this level of observation required. Teams of trained watchers maintaining continuous surveillance of the sky for centuries. Standardized notation systems for recording observations. Quality control procedures to verify accuracy. Institutional memory systems to preserve and build upon accumulated knowledge. The organizational infrastructure supporting Mesopotamian astronomy rivaled that of modern observatories. Yet it operated without telescopes, without mechanical clocks, without the mathematical tools we consider essential for precision astronomy. The division of the sky into 3 ways or zones, the way of Anu covering the northern celestial hemisphere, the way of Enlil encompassing the central region, and the way of Enki governing the southern stars, represents more than poetic metaphor. Recent analysis shows this system provided a coordinate framework allowing precise location of celestial phenomena. Each zone contained specific star groups with carefully noted positions and movement patterns. This celestial mapping system paralleled and supported the terrestrial geography of Mesopotamian civilization. Archaeological discoveries at sites like Babylon and Sippar have uncovered astronomical diaries spanning centuries, day-by-day records of celestial observations maintained with extraordinary consistency. These texts document lunar phases, planetary positions, meteorological conditions, and even atmospheric phenomena like halos around the sun and moon. The level of detail suggests not casual interest, but urgent necessity, As if accurate knowledge of celestial patterns was essential for some larger purpose, the mathematical sophistication underlying these observations becomes apparent when modern computers verify ancient calculations. Babylonian astronomers developed geometric methods for predicting planetary positions that remained unsurpassed until Kepler. They calculated the synodic periods of planets with precision that matches modern measurements. They predicted eclipses centuries in advance with accuracy that astonished European astronomers when these texts were first translated in the 19th century. But perhaps most intriguing are the texts that describe direct communication between earthly observers and celestial beings. The ritual series When Anu Enlil and Enki includes detailed protocols for interpreting divine messages encoded in astronomical phenomena. These weren't abstract theological speculations but practical procedures, complete with technical vocabularies and step-by-step instructions for maintaining what the texts describe as regular contact with sky-dwelling authorities. Modern radio telescope observations have revealed that space is filled with electromagnetic signals, natural radio emissions from distant galaxies, structured patterns that carry information across cosmic distances. Ancient Mesopotamian texts describe similar phenomena using different vocabulary. They speak of words from heaven, of signs and messages embedded in celestial movements, of techniques for listening to the voice of the stars. Could their careful attention to astronomical patterns have detected forms of communication that we're only beginning to recognize with modern technology? The correlation between astronomical events and earthly affairs recorded in these texts shows patterns that extend beyond mere superstition. Major political changes, environmental shifts, technological innovations all seem to cluster around specific celestial configurations in ways that suggest either remarkable coincidence or genuine causal relationships. Modern chaos theory and systems analysis provide frameworks for understanding how distant influences might affect complex local phenomena, offering scientific contexts for what ancient texts describe as divine intervention. The disappearance of this astronomical tradition parallels the decline of Mesopotamian civilization itself. Later periods show reduced precision, simplified methods, gradual loss of the specialized knowledge that had been carefully maintained for over a millennium. It's as if the watchers gradually stopped watching, the listeners ceased to listen. The careful dialogue between earth and heaven slowly faded into silence. Recent satellite archaeology has identified numerous sites across Mesopotamia where circular stone foundations mark the locations of ancient observatories. These structures were oriented to track specific celestial phenomena, equipped with sightlines and measuring devices that allowed precise determination of astronomical positions. Many show evidence of regular maintenance and modification across centuries, suggesting continuous use and gradual refinement of observational techniques. The consistency of astronomical knowledge across different Mesopotamian cities implies coordinated effort, shared protocols, systematic communication between widely separated observation centers. This network approach to data collection and analysis anticipates modern international astronomical collaboration, yet it operated in an era when long-distance communication required human messengers traveling for weeks across difficult terrain. Tonight, as we look up at the same stars that captured ancient attention with such intensity, we wonder what they were really watching for. What messages were encoded in celestial patterns? What relationships were being maintained through careful attention to astronomical cycles? What knowledge was gradually lost as the watchers turned their eyes from heaven to earth? In the darkness between stars, patterns emerge, not just of light and movement, but of memory itself, memory encoded in molecules, in isotopes, in the very atoms that compose our bodies and connect us to stories older than written history, older than human civilization, older than the formation of our planet itself. The Mesopotamian creation myth speaks of humanity shaped from clay, mixed with divine blood, animated by the breath of gods who came from distant places among the stars. Modern molecular biology tells a different story, of DNA sequences emerging from primordial chemistry, of evolutionary processes spanning billions of years, of genetic information passed across countless generations through mechanisms that ancient peoples could never have imagined. Yet both narratives speak of the same fundamental mystery: how consciousness emerged from matter, how awareness arose from dust. Recent advances in isotope analysis allow us to trace the atomic history of human remains found at archaeological sites. Strontium isotopes in tooth enamel reveal the geological regions where people spent their childhood years. Carbon and nitrogen ratios in bone collagen document dietary patterns across entire lifespans. Oxygen isotopes preserve records of ancient climate conditions, seasonal variations, even migration patterns that followed changing environmental conditions. When applied to skeletal remains from early Mesopotamian sites, these techniques reveal surprising patterns. Populations show evidence of genetic admixture from distant geographic regions, not gradual gene flow through normal population movement, but sudden influx of genetic variants that seem to appear simultaneously across multiple sites. It's as if new biological information was introduced rapidly into existing populations, creating genetic signatures that persist in modern Middle Eastern populations. The clay tablets describe this process explicitly. The Atrahasis epic details how the Anunnaki mixed their essence with earthly clay to create a new form of human being. Later texts elaborate on this theme, describing genetic experimentation, biological modification, the creation of hybrid populations with enhanced capabilities. Modern genetics provides vocabulary for understanding such concepts: gene insertion, chromosome modification, epigenetic activation. But the ancient texts describe these processes using their own technical terminology with remarkable precision. Archaeological sites across Mesopotamia yield evidence of sudden technological advancement that parallels the genetic anomalies. Metallurgy appears fully developed without apparent precursor stages. Agricultural techniques emerge complete with sophisticated understanding of soil chemistry, irrigation engineering, crop rotation schedules. Urban planning concepts appear that require advanced knowledge of mathematics, surveying, and organizational management. The timeline is compressed in ways that challenge gradualist models of cultural development. Modern paleogenetics can now extract DNA from ancient human remains, creating genetic profiles that reveal family relationships, population movements, even disease susceptibilities of people who lived thousands of years ago. Analysis of genetic material from early Mesopotamian burials shows unexpected diversity, not the relatively homogeneous patterns expected from isolated populations, but genetic complexity suggesting multiple ancestral sources, some of which don't match known human migration patterns. The concept of genetic memory, information encoded in DNA that influences behavior across generations, provides another lens for examining ancient narratives. Recent research in epigenetics demonstrates that environmental stresses, traumatic experiences, even cultural practices can create heritable changes in gene expression that affect descendant populations for multiple generations. Could the persistent mythological memories of divine contact represent genetic echoes of actual historical events? Isotope analysis of ancient metals found at Mesopotamian sites reveals another layer of mystery. Copper and tin alloys contain trace element signatures that don't match local ore deposits but correspond to sources scattered across vast geographic regions, some in mountain ranges thousands of miles distant, others in locations that haven't been identified despite decades of geological survey. The logistics of obtaining these materials suggest trade networks or transportation capabilities that exceed our understanding of Bronze Age civilization. The precision of ancient astronomical calculations takes on new significance when viewed through the lens of modern physics. Babylonian mathematical techniques for predicting planetary positions used constants and coefficients that required precise knowledge of gravitational interactions, orbital mechanics, and celestial dynamics. These calculations work because they're based on accurate understanding of fundamental physical principles that weren't officially discovered until the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries. Recent analysis of cosmic dust samples collected by space missions reveals that our solar system is filled with microscopic particles containing organic molecules, amino acids, nucleic acid precursors, even complex carbon compounds that could serve as building blocks for life. This star dust carries isotope signatures that vary depending on its stellar origins, creating a kind of molecular fingerprint system that connects all matter to its cosmic sources. Human bodies contain elements forged in ancient supernova, iron in our blood, calcium in our bones, carbon in our DNA. We are literally made from star dust, carrying within our cellular structure the atomic memory of cosmic events that occurred billions of years before Earth formed. The clay tablets describe this connection poetically: from dust you came, to dust you shall return, but the starfire within you is eternal. Tonight, as we consider our atomic ancestry, we glimpse the deeper implications of ancient creation stories. Whether divine intervention or natural process, the emergence of consciousness from cosmic dust represents one of the universe's most remarkable achievements. The mystery isn't whether gods shaped us from clay, but how clay learned to contemplate the stars, how dust developed the capacity to remember its origins, how matter discovered itself capable of wonder, and in that wonder, time itself seems to fold inward, carrying whispers of what once was and what might yet be discovered, discoveries buried in layers of earth that hold not only biological fossils, but the fossilized traces of intelligence, technology, and purpose that extend far beyond the conventional timeline of human development. Deep beneath the sands of Mesopotamia, archaeologists work with the patience of geologists, excavating not just artifacts but entire landscapes frozen in time. Each layer represents a distinct historical period: pottery styles, architectural techniques, technological capabilities preserved in stratigraphic sequence like pages in a book written in earth and stone. But among these familiar archaeological signatures, researchers occasionally find anomalies that challenge our understanding of ancient capabilities. Modern forensic archaeology applies techniques developed for crime scene investigation to ancient sites. Ground-penetrating radar reveals subsurface features before excavation begins. Multispectral imaging detects patterns invisible to conventional photography. Microscopic analysis identifies tool marks, manufacturing techniques, even fingerprints preserved on ancient ceramics. These methods reveal a level of technological sophistication in ancient Mesopotamian artifacts that often exceeds what should have been possible with known Bronze Age techniques. Consider the precision ground lenses found at sites like Nimrud and Babylon, optical devices manufactured to tolerances that weren't achieved again until the development of modern grinding techniques in the 18th century. Chemical analysis reveals that these weren't accidental byproducts of glassmaking, but deliberately crafted optical instruments, ground and polished to specific focal lengths using methods that remain unclear. Ancient texts describe seeing stones that allowed observation of distant objects, crystal eyes that revealed hidden details, lights that brought far things near. Metallurgical analysis of ancient bronzes reveals another technological mystery. Mesopotamian artisans created alloys with properties that modern metallurgists struggle to replicate using traditional techniques. Some Bronze Age weapons show microscopic laminar structures that suggest controlled manipulation of crystalline formation during cooling. Others contain trace elements that improve strength and corrosion resistance in ways that anticipate modern materials science. The knowledge required for these achievements implies understanding of atomic structure and chemical bonding that wasn't officially developed until the 20th century. Recent excavations at sites like Tel Assorwan have uncovered workshop areas where ancient craftsmen worked with materials that shouldn't have been available in Mesopotamia. Platinum group metals that require high-temperature extraction techniques. Tungsten alloys that need specialized equipment for processing. Ceramic composites incorporating reinforcing fibers that improve strength and thermal resistance. The procurement and processing of these materials suggests access to industrial capabilities that transcend Bronze Age limitations. Soil core analysis from multiple Mesopotamian sites reveals isotope anomalies that correlate with historical periods described in cuneiform texts as times of divine visitation. Layers of sediment show sudden spikes in rare earth elements, unusual electromagnetic signatures preserved in crystalline structures, even traces of synthetic compounds that shouldn't exist in natural geological formations. These chemical fingerprints suggest technological processes that left permanent traces in the archaeological record. The concept of technofossils, artifacts of technological civilization preserved in geological strata, provides a framework for understanding how advanced activities might be detected thousands of years after they occurred. Modern industrial processes leave distinctive signatures: altered atmospheric chemistry, novel material compositions, artificial isotope ratios. If similar technologies operated in ancient times, they would create similar signatures preserved in appropriate geological contexts. Electron microscopy of ancient ceramics reveals manufacturing techniques that challenge conventional understanding of Bronze Age capabilities. Some pottery shows evidence of controlled atmosphere firing that required precise regulation of temperature and gas composition. Others display surface treatments that involve nanotechnology-scale manipulation of material properties. The tools and knowledge required for these achievements suggest access to scientific principles and manufacturing techniques that anticipate modern industrial chemistry. Magnetic surveys of Mesopotamian archaeological sites detect subsurface anomalies that don't correspond to known architectural features. Some appear to be large metallic objects buried at considerable depths. Others show magnetic signatures suggesting the presence of materials with unusual electromagnetic properties. Ground truthing through careful excavation has revealed foundation structures built from precisely cut stones weighing hundreds of tons, fitted together with tolerances measured in millimeters, secured with metal clamps using alloys that resist corrosion after millennia of burial. The organization required for such projects implies administrative and logistical capabilities that parallel modern industrial operations. Resource procurement from distant sources, quality control systems for materials and manufacturing, coordination of specialized work crews with advanced technical training, project management systems capable of maintaining complex operations across extended time periods. The institutional infrastructure supporting these achievements suggests social organization that transcends traditional models of Bronze Age civilization. Ancient texts describe this infrastructure explicitly. Administrative archives document supply chains spanning continents. Technical manuals provide detailed instructions for manufacturing processes. Personnel records track specialized craftsmen with hereditary technical knowledge. These weren't primitive societies struggling with basic survival needs, but complex civilizations with access to resources and capabilities that remain partially mysterious despite intensive archaeological investigation. Recent advances in ancient DNA analysis have revealed another dimension of archaeological mystery. Genetic material extracted from skeletal remains at Mesopotamian sites shows population diversity that suggests contact with groups from geographically distant regions, not gradual migration patterns, but sudden appearance of genetic variants that don't match known human dispersal routes. Some sequences show unusual characteristics that don't correspond to known human genetic variation, raising questions about the biological relationships that existed in ancient times. The preservation of organic materials in some Mesopotamian contexts allows analysis of ancient biological samples using modern biochemical techniques. Protein analysis of mummified tissues reveals dietary patterns that include consumption of plants and animals from ecosystems that didn't exist in Mesopotamia during the relevant time periods. This suggests either long-distance trade in perishable goods or access to biological resources through methods that remain unclear. Tonight, as we contemplate these fossilized traces of ancient sophistication, we're reminded that archaeology is ultimately the study of intelligence, the patterns left by minds that planned, created, and achieved goals that required knowledge, skill, and resources. The traces we find in Mesopotamian archaeological contexts suggest intelligence operating at levels, and in ways that challenge our assumptions about ancient capabilities and ancient limitations. But intelligence, like memory, can be fragmented, scattered across time in patterns that require patience to decode, and nowhere is this fragmentation more apparent than in the geological evidence of catastrophic flooding that marks the boundary between sophisticated early civilizations and the scattered communities that rebuilt from their ruins. The Black Sea holds secrets locked in layers of sediment that tell a story of sudden, dramatic change. Core samples extracted from the sea floor reveal a distinct transition layer dated to approximately 7,500 years ago, a geological moment when freshwater lake became saltwater sea, when entire coastal civilizations vanished beneath rising waters in what geologists now recognize as one of the most rapid larger-scale flooding events in human history. Modern marine archaeology using side-scan sonar and remotely operated vehicles has mapped submerged coastal features around the Black Sea that show clear evidence of human habitation. Ancient riverbeds, settlement sites, even agricultural terraces lie beneath hundreds of feet of water, preserved in anaerobic conditions that maintain organic materials for millennia. These underwater archaeological sites reveal sophisticated communities with advanced architecture, specialized crafts, and complex social organization, civilizations that thrived before the flood and disappeared beneath the waters. The mechanism of this flooding has been reconstructed through careful geological analysis. As glacial ice sheets melted at the end of the last ice age, sea levels rose globally. When Mediterranean waters reached critical heights, they breached the narrow land bridge at what is now the Bosphorus, creating a massive waterfall that poured salt water into the Black Sea basin at rates 200 times greater than Niagara Falls. The sound would have been audible for hundreds of miles. The coastal flooding would have been visible from space. Similar flood events occurred around the world during this period of rapid climate change. The English Channel was carved by catastrophic drainage of glacial lakes. The scablands of Washington state were sculpted by floods that released the energy equivalent of multiple nuclear weapons. The Amazon basin shows evidence of massive flood cycles that reconfigured entire river systems. These weren't gradual changes but sudden, violent transformations that reset the geological and archaeological records of entire regions. Remarkably, human cultural memory preserved accurate records of these events. Nearly every ancient tradition contains detailed flood narratives that describe not just local inundations, but global catastrophe. The Epic of Gilgamesh provides the oldest written account, describing floods that covered mountains, destroyed cities, and required divine intervention to preserve human and animal populations. Later versions in Hebrew, Greek, and other traditions maintain consistent details despite being separated by centuries and thousands of miles. The precision of these mythological accounts becomes apparent when compared with geological evidence. Ancient texts describe specific durations, water levels, geographic features, and environmental changes that match what researchers find in flood deposit layers and sediment cores. The Mesopotamian flood epic mentions 7 days and 7 nights of continuous rainfall, followed by gradual recession, timing that corresponds to hydrological models of how such flooding events would actually unfold. Archaeological evidence suggests that pre-flood civilizations possessed knowledge and capabilities that were partially lost during the catastrophe and only gradually recovered over subsequent millennia. The most sophisticated artifacts, the most advanced architectural techniques, the most precise astronomical observations cluster in periods immediately before these flood events. Post-flood cultures show reduced technological capabilities, simplified artistic styles, loss of specialized knowledge that had been carefully maintained for centuries. This pattern of loss and recovery appears globally. Megalithic construction techniques disappeared from Europe after climate catastrophes and weren't redeveloped until classical times. Advanced metallurgy in South America shows similar discontinuity. Chinese astronomical records describe loss of ancient knowledge during flood periods, followed by gradual rediscovery of astronomical principles that had been known to the ancients. The flood represents not just physical catastrophe but cultural bottleneck, a moment when accumulated knowledge was partially lost and had to be rebuilt from fragmentary memories. Cuneiform tablets describe the Anunnaki's response to impending flood with remarkable specificity. Texts detail advanced warning systems, evacuation procedures, preservation protocols for maintaining critical knowledge through the catastrophe. These weren't mystical visions, but practical planning documents, administrative records of organized efforts to protect both human populations and essential information. The tablets describe underground storage facilities, sealed archives, designated survival groups with specific responsibilities for preserving different aspects of civilization. Modern climate science provides context for understanding how such events could be predicted in advance. Glacial melt patterns, atmospheric circulation changes, oceanic current shifts. These larger-scale environmental changes unfold over decades or centuries before reaching critical thresholds. Ancient astronomical observation systems were sophisticated enough to detect long-term climate cycles, to recognize patterns that indicated approaching environmental crisis. The advanced knowledge attributed to the Anunnaki might represent early warning capabilities based on systematic environmental monitoring. The silence that followed these flood events is preserved in archaeological layers that show sudden cessation of complex cultural activities. Workshop areas were abandoned. Astronomical observation sites fell into disuse. Administrative archives end abruptly. The institutional infrastructure supporting advanced civilization collapsed, leaving scattered populations to rebuild from partial memories and fragmentary knowledge. This explains the mythological emphasis on divine instruction. surviving populations received guidance from those who had preserved essential knowledge through the catastrophe. Recent analysis of genetic bottlenecks in human populations confirms that major population reductions occurred during this period. Mitochondrial DNA studies suggest that human numbers dropped dramatically around 7,000 years ago, creating founder effects that persist in modern populations. These genetic signatures match the timing and geographic distribution of major flood events, supporting models of catastrophic population reduction, followed by gradual recovery and expansion. Tonight, as we contemplate these ancient catastrophes, we recognize them as moments when the trajectory of human civilization was fundamentally altered. Knowledge was lost, relationships were broken. The careful dialogue between earth and sky was interrupted by the roar of rushing water and the silence that followed. In that silence, scattered survivors carried forward fragments of memory, pieces of understanding that would eventually be woven into new narratives of origin and purpose. And from those fragments, across generations of retelling, the voices of the Anunnaki continued to whisper against the universal tendency toward dissolution that physicists call entropy, the fundamental force that erodes mountains, scatters stars, and transforms all complex systems into simpler components until only the most basic patterns remain. Entropy is the universe's most patient destroyer. It works not through dramatic catastrophe, but through countless small increments of decay. The gradual wearing away of stone by wind and rain, the slow corruption of manuscripts by time and moisture, the inevitable fading of human memory across generations. Every organized system, from galactic clusters to cuneiform tablets, succumbs eventually to entropy's quiet persistence. Yet somehow, against all thermodynamic probability, the myths of the Anunnaki resist this universal dissolution. Consider what this resistance requires. Information theory tells us that complex patterns can survive entropic decay only through active maintenance. Continuous energy input that counteracts the natural tendency toward randomness. DNA survives across billions of years because cellular machinery constantly repairs and replicates genetic information. Cultural traditions persist because human communities invest energy in preserving, transmitting, and renewing their essential stories. The Anunnaki narratives have survived for over 5 millennia, passed through dozens of languages, transmitted across cultural boundaries that normally fragment and destroy mythological coherence. This survival becomes even more remarkable when we consider the specific content of these myths. Abstract philosophical concepts or simple moral teachings might persist through their inherent memorability, but the Anunnaki stories preserve technical details, precise genealogies, complex astronomical correlations, and administrative procedures that serve no obvious mythological function. These elements should be the first casualties of cultural transmission, edited out by storytellers who streamline narratives for easier memorization. Instead, they persist across centuries with remarkable consistency. Modern information science provides mathematical models for understanding how signal degrades through transmission across noisy channels. Every act of translation, every generation of oral transmission, every copying of manuscripts introduces errors that accumulate over time until the original message becomes unrecognizable. The technical term is mutational decay, the inevitable corruption of information through imperfect replication. Archaeological analysis of how myths change over time confirms these theoretical predictions. Details are lost, meanings shift, original contexts fade into obscurity, but the Anunnaki narratives show different patterns. Instead of degrading through transmission, they often become more precise, more detailed, more internally consistent across successive versions. Babylonian texts elaborate on Sumerian originals with additional technical specifications. Akkadian translations clarify astronomical details that were only implicit in earlier versions. Later commentaries provide cross-references and systematic interpretations that suggest active scholarly effort to maintain and expand these narrative systems. This suggests that the myths weren't simply stories passed from one generation to the next, but were connected to ongoing research programs, institutional efforts to understand and document phenomena that remained relevant across centuries. The consistency across cultures indicates not just faithful preservation, but active verification, as if different communities were observing the same phenomena and comparing their observations to traditional accounts. Recent studies of how scientific knowledge survives cultural disruption provide analogous examples. During periods of social collapse, Technical information is often preserved in mythological formats that protect it from loss while making it accessible to future generations who might lack the institutional frameworks for maintaining formal scientific traditions. Mathematical concepts appear as numerological mysticism. Astronomical data is embedded in creation myths. Medical knowledge survives as religious rituals. This encoding protects essential information from entropic loss while maintaining its practical utility. The Anunnaki myths might represent similar encoding, technical knowledge about contact, communication, and collaboration preserved in narrative formats that could survive cultural catastrophe. The genealogies preserve organizational structures. The astronomical correlations maintain observational data. The ritual procedures encode communication protocols. What appears to be mythology might actually be compressed technical documentation, resistant to entropic decay because it serves ongoing practical functions. Quantum mechanics adds another dimension to this analysis. At fundamental levels, information cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed or transferred to other systems. This principle, known as quantum information conservation, suggests that patterns of organization, once established, leave permanent traces in the quantum structure of spacetime itself. The universe retains memory of every interaction, every decision, every moment of organized complexity, even after the physical systems that generated these patterns have long since decayed. Could the persistence of Anunnaki narratives reflect this deeper form of information conservation? Modern physics describes non-local correlations, instantaneous connections between separated systems that transcend conventional limitations of space and time. If consciousness participates in quantum information networks, then memories, ideas, and cultural patterns might persist through mechanisms that operate beyond the usual constraints of physical transmission and storage. Archaeological evidence supports this interpretation. Sites associated with Anunnaki narratives often show unusual geomagnetic properties, subtle but consistent deviations from normal electromagnetic patterns that suggest the presence of materials or structures with anomalous magnetic characteristics. These signatures persist across millennia, creating detectable patterns that correlate with the geographic distribution of ancient texts and mythological traditions. The mathematics of complex systems reveals another relevant principle: emergent stability. Under certain conditions, complex patterns can become self-reinforcing, creating feedback loops that resist entropic degradation. Cultural anthropologists have documented similar phenomena in religious traditions that maintain remarkable coherence across vast temporal and geographical ranges. These systems survive because they generate their own maintenance mechanisms, creating communities of practitioners who have incentives to preserve and transmit essential information. The Anunnaki traditions might represent this type of emergent stability, narratives so rich in internal connections, so deeply embedded in practical applications, so intimately connected to ongoing human experiences that they generate their own preservation mechanisms. Each generation finds new relevance in ancient texts, discovers new correlations between mythological accounts and contemporary observations, develops new techniques for interpreting and applying traditional knowledge. Tonight, as we consider entropy's patient work of dissolution, we're struck by the exceptions. The patterns that persist, the information that survives, the voices that continue to whisper across the vast silence of time. Perhaps these exceptions reveal something fundamental about the nature of consciousness, memory, and meaning in a universe that seems designed to forget everything it has learned. In resisting entropy, these ancient voices suggest that some forms of information transcend the physical systems that first gave them expression and perhaps find their way into the more permanent archives of planetary memory. The geological record that preserves in rock, ice, and sediment the traces of every significant event that has shaped Earth's history across billions of years. The planet remembers everything. Volcanic eruptions leave isotope signatures in ice cores extracted from Greenland glaciers. Asteroid impacts create shocked quartz crystals scattered across continents. Mass extinction events are preserved in distinctive clay layers that mark the boundaries between geological epochs. This planetary memory system operates with extraordinary precision, recording not just major catastrophes, but subtle environmental changes, atmospheric variations, even the electromagnetic effects of solar storms that occurred millions of years ago. Modern paleoclimatology can reconstruct ancient weather patterns with startling accuracy. Tree ring analysis reveals year-by-year temperature and precipitation data extending back thousands of years. Coral growth rings preserve seasonal records of ocean chemistry and water temperature. Stalactite formations in caves create precise chronologies of groundwater conditions and atmospheric composition. These natural recording systems maintain archives of environmental information with temporal resolution that rivals modern scientific instrumentation. If the Anunnaki represented a technological civilization that once operated on Earth, their activities would have left detectable traces in these geological archives. Larger-scale mining operations would show up as unusual mineral extraction patterns preserved in ancient sediment cores. Industrial processes would create synthetic compounds that don't occur naturally but persist in appropriate stratigraphic contexts. Atmospheric pollution would alter the chemical composition of ice layers and tree rings. Even temporary activities would leave permanent signatures in the planetary record. Recent analysis of deep ocean sediment cores reveals several periods of anomalous metal deposition that don't correspond to known natural phenomena. Layers containing unusual concentrations of platinum group elements appear in sediments dating to approximately 12,000 years ago, elements that typically require high-temperature extraction and processing techniques. The geographic distribution of these deposits suggests coordinated mining operations spanning multiple continents during a period when human civilization was supposedly limited to hunter-gatherer societies. Atmospheric ice core data from Antarctica shows unusual chemical signatures during the same time period. Elevated concentrations of rare earth elements appear in ice layers that correspond to the end of the last glacial period. Even more intriguingly, isotope ratios in these deposits don't match natural abundance patterns, but show the signatures of artificial enrichment processes. The quantities involved suggest industrial-scale operations that would have required technological capabilities far exceeding conventional models of human development. Magnetic field variations preserved in igneous rock formations reveal another layer of planetary memory. The Earth's magnetic field fluctuates continuously, and these variations are recorded in the magnetic orientation of cooling lava flows and sediment deposits. Analysis of paleomagnetic data reveals several periods of unusual magnetic disturbance that correlate with historical periods described in cuneiform texts as times of divine activity and sky battles. These weren't gradual changes but sudden, dramatic alterations in Earth's magnetic environment that suggest the operation of powerful electromagnetic technologies. Geological surveys using satellite-based gravitometric analysis have identified subsurface structures that don't correspond to known natural formations. Some appear to be large artificial cavities excavated in solid bedrock. Others show the gravitational signatures of dense metallic objects buried at considerable depths. The precision and scale of these structures suggest advanced excavation and construction capabilities, yet they're located in regions where archaeological surveys have found no evidence of corresponding surface civilizations. Recent advances in atmospheric chemistry allow detection of trace compounds that serve as signatures of specific technological processes. Industrial civilizations produce characteristic atmospheric pollutants, synthetic molecules that don't occur naturally but persist in the environment for extended periods. Analysis of ancient ice cores and sediment deposits could theoretically detect these technological signatures from civilizations that operated thousands of years ago, assuming they used similar industrial processes. The search for such signatures has yielded intriguing preliminary results. Several research groups have reported a detection of synthetic compounds in geological contexts that predate known human industrial activity. These findings remain controversial because they challenge fundamental assumptions about technological development timelines. But if confirmed, they would provide direct physical evidence of advanced technological activity in the deep past. Crystalline structures in ancient quartz deposits preserve information about the electromagnetic environment when they formed. Variations in crystal lattice patterns reveal the intensity and frequency characteristics of ambient electromagnetic fields during crystal formation. Analysis of quartz samples from sites associated with Anunnaki narratives shows unusual patterns that suggest exposure to artificial electromagnetic fields. Structured, coherent signals rather than the random electromagnetic noise typical of natural environments. Biological systems also participate in planetary memory through evolutionary adaptations that preserve information about past environmental conditions. Genetic analysis of ancient plant and animal remains reveals adaptation patterns that reflect exposure to environmental stresses that shouldn't have existed during the relevant time periods. Some species show genetic modifications that suggest artificial selection, or even genetic engineering using techniques that anticipate modern biotechnology. The geological record of climate change provides another avenue for detecting past technological activity. Advanced civilizations would necessarily have produced atmospheric effects similar to those associated with modern industrial activity, altered greenhouse gas concentrations, changed aerosol distributions, modified atmospheric chemistry. These effects would be preserved in ice cores, sediment deposits, and biological remains, creating detectable signatures of technological activity in the paleoclimate record. Ocean chemistry variations preserved in marine sediments reveal additional dimensions of planetary memory. Major changes in seawater composition leave permanent traces in the chemical structure of calcium carbonate shells and coral skeletons. Recent analysis of marine cores shows several periods of unusual ocean chemistry that don't correspond to known natural phenomena. These anomalies suggest larger-scale alterations of marine chemistry through artificial processes, perhaps resource extraction, waste disposal, or other technological activities. The search for technological signatures in the geological record represents a new frontier in archaeology, the application of planetary science techniques to questions about ancient civilizations. This approach bypasses the limitations of conventional archaeological methods by looking for traces of activity that would necessarily be preserved in natural recording systems, regardless of whether cultural artifacts survived. Tonight, as we consider the Earth's vast memory systems, we're reminded that our planet maintains perfect records of its entire history. Every event, every process, every moment of technological activity leaves permanent traces in the geological archive. If advanced civilizations once operated on Earth, the evidence exists, waiting in ice cores and sediment deposits, preserved in magnetic patterns and isotope ratios, encoded in the planetary memory that forgets nothing and records everything. These records whisper of possibilities that stretch beyond current archaeological horizons, pointing toward evidence written in the very structure of the world itself, and reflected back to us through the ancient practice of looking upward, of seeking in the patterns of stars and planets the meanings that connect earthly existence to cosmic purpose. The night sky has always served as humanity's first mirror, a vast, dark surface that reflects our deepest questions about origin, destination, and the nature of consciousness itself. Ancient Mesopotamians didn't simply observe celestial phenomena, but engaged in systematic dialogue with the patterns they found there, developing sophisticated interpretative systems that treated astronomical events as a form of communication, a language written in light across the darkness of space. Modern astronomy reveals that this ancient perspective contained profound insights that anticipate contemporary understanding of cosmic connectivity. We now know that Earth exists within a complex web of gravitational influences, electromagnetic fields, and particle streams that connect our planet to distant stellar phenomena in ways that ancient peoples could sense but couldn't scientifically describe. Solar wind variations affect terrestrial weather patterns. Galactic magnetic field orientations influence cosmic ray bombardment. Even gravitational waves from distant black hole collisions create subtle vibrations that propagate through space-time itself. The Anunnaki narratives consistently describe their origins in celestial realms, their ability to traverse cosmic distances, their intimate connection to stellar and planetary cycles that governed earthly activities. These weren't abstract theological concepts, but specific technical descriptions of relationships between terrestrial events and cosmic phenomena. Modern astrophysics provides frameworks for understanding how such relationships might operate through electromagnetic coupling, gravitational resonance, quantum entanglement effects that create instantaneous correlations across vast distances. Recent discoveries in exoplanet research have revolutionized our understanding of planetary system formation and evolution. We now know that planets regularly migrate between different orbital positions, that stellar encounters can dramatically alter planetary system configurations, that the cosmos is filled with rogue planets ejected from their original star systems to wander freely through interstellar space. The dynamic, changing nature of cosmic environments provides context for understanding ancient descriptions of planets of the Anunnaki, celestial bodies that moved between different stellar systems according to cycles that influenced events across multiple worlds. The precision of ancient astronomical observations becomes even more remarkable when viewed through the lens of modern stellar dynamics. Babylonian astronomers tracked not only the obvious motions of planets and stars, but subtle variations in brightness, minor perturbations in orbital mechanics, long-term precession cycles that required centuries of continuous observation to document accurately. This level of precision suggests access to observational capabilities that transcended naked-eye astronomy, perhaps through optical instruments, perhaps through other detection methods that remain unclear. Archaeological analysis of ancient observatories reveals architectural features that seem designed for functions beyond simple visual observation. Stone circles show acoustic properties that amplify and focus sound waves in ways that might enhance audio detection of atmospheric phenomena. Underground chambers contain naturally occurring electromagnetic resonance effects that could serve as primitive radio receivers. Water-filled observation pools create mirror surfaces that eliminate atmospheric distortion while providing platforms for precision measurement of celestial positions. The mathematical sophistication underlying ancient astronomical calculations implies access to computational resources that challenge our understanding of Bronze Age capabilities. Babylonian ephemeris tables predict planetary positions using mathematical techniques that weren't rediscovered until the development of modern calculus. These calculations require processing large quantities of observational data using standardized algorithms applied consistently across extended time periods. The institutional infrastructure supporting such computational astronomy parallels modern scientific organizations in scope and complexity. Modern radio astronomy has revealed that space is filled with structured electromagnetic signals, natural emissions from pulsars, controlled transmissions from human space missions, background radiation carrying information about cosmic evolution across billions of years. Ancient texts describe similar phenomena using different vocabulary voices from heaven. Messages written in starlight, songs of the wandering gods that could be detected and interpreted by trained observers using specialized techniques. Could ancient astronomical systems have detected artificial signals from distant technological civilizations? The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, as CT uses sophisticated radio telescopes to scan cosmic frequencies for patterns that indicate artificial origins. But simpler detection methods might reveal structured signals that carry information across interstellar distances. Variations in stellar brightness could encode binary data. Atmospheric compositions of exoplanets might show artificial modifications. Even gravitational wave patterns could carry embedded information detectable through careful analysis of celestial mechanics. The consistent global distribution of similar astronomical mythologies suggests coordinated observation programs that spanned continents and cultures. Pyramid complexes in Egypt mirror constellation patterns visible from the northern hemisphere. Megalithic structures in Europe show alignments with stellar phenomena that require precise knowledge of astronomical mechanics. Temple orientations in Asia reflect understanding of planetary cycles that parallels Mesopotamian astronomical systems. This worldwide consistency implies either independent discovery of identical astronomical principles or coordinated information sharing between ancient civilizations. The decline of precision astronomy correlates with the disappearance of Anunnaki narratives from cuneiform literature. Later periods show reduced observational accuracy, simplified mathematical techniques, loss of institutional knowledge that had been carefully maintained for over a millennium. It's as if the observers gradually stopped receiving the signals they had been monitoring, as if the cosmic dialogue that had sustained ancient astronomical traditions slowly faded into static and silence. Modern space exploration provides new perspectives on ancient astronomical accounts. Satellite observations reveal that Earth's electromagnetic environment extends far into space, creating a complex interaction zone where solar wind meets terrestrial magnetic fields. This magnetosphere fluctuates continuously in response to solar activity, cosmic ray bombardment, and other external influences. Ancient texts describe similar phenomena as the realm where sky gods conducted their activities, the boundary zone between earthly and celestial domains. Tonight, as we look up at the same stars that captured ancient attention with such intensity, We see them not as distant lights, but as components of an integrated cosmic system that includes our own world. The mirror of the stars reflects back images of connection, communication, and purpose that transcend the boundaries of individual worlds and individual lifetimes. In that reflection, we glimpse possibilities that stretch beyond current scientific horizons, pointing toward forms of consciousness and communication that operate on cosmic scales. In the darkness between stars, ancient mirrors still reflect the light of questions that connect all worlds, all minds, all moments of wonder about who we are, where we came from, and what it means to be human in a universe that seems designed to generate consciousness, memory, and the persistent questions that define our existence. Modern genetics has revealed that human identity exists in layers, not just individual DNA sequences, but population histories, migration patterns, and genetic admixture events that connect every person to a vast network of ancestral relationships extending across hundreds of thousands of years. We carry within our cells the molecular signatures of epic journeys, environmental adaptations, and encounters between different populations that shaped our species in ways we're only beginning to understand. Recent advances in paleogenetics allow reconstruction of human family trees that span continents and millennia. Mitochondrial DNA preserves maternal lineages that can be traced back to common ancestors who lived in Africa over 200,000 years ago. Chromosome analysis reveals paternal lineages that document male migration patterns across the ancient world. But these genetic archives also contain anomalies, sudden population expansions, unexpected genetic diversity, admixture events that don't fit standard models of human dispersal and development. The most intriguing anomalies cluster around the same time periods and geographic regions associated with Anunnaki narratives. Genetic analysis of ancient human remains from Mesopotamia shows population characteristics that suggest contact with groups possessing genetic variants that don't match known human migration routes. Some sequences display unusual characteristics that challenge conventional understanding of human genetic diversity. It's as if new genetic information appeared suddenly in existing populations without clear sources or gradual development patterns. Modern anthropology recognizes that human identity involves more than biological inheritance. Cultural transmission, the process by which knowledge, values, and behaviors pass from one generation to the next, creates parallel inheritance systems that operate alongside genetic mechanisms. Language, technology, social organization, and symbolic systems evolve according to their own dynamics, sometimes faster than biological evolution, sometimes in ways that reshape the selection pressures affecting genetic development. The Anunnaki narratives describe this process explicitly. Ancient texts detail how divine instruction transformed human capabilities, how contact with sky beings altered not just knowledge but fundamental aspects of human nature. These accounts don't describe abstract spiritual transformation, but specific modifications, enhanced longevity, improved cognitive abilities, access to specialized knowledge that enabled technological and social innovations. Modern genetics provides vocabulary for understanding such changes: gene expression modification, epigenetic activation, horizontal gene transfer processes that could introduce new capabilities into existing populations. Archaeological evidence supports these textual accounts. The transition from hunter-gatherer societies to agricultural civilizations shows technological advancement that seems compressed in time, as if multiple innovations appeared simultaneously rather than developing through gradual experimentation and refinement. Urban planning, metallurgy, writing systems, astronomical observation techniques all emerge during narrow time windows with sophistication that suggests access to systematic instruction rather than independent invention. Recent research in cognitive archaeology reveals another dimension of human identity transformation. Analysis of ancient art tools and symbolic systems shows evidence of cognitive innovations that enhanced human information processing capabilities. The development of writing systems, mathematical notation, and astronomical calculation methods required mental adaptations that went beyond simple cultural learning. These achievements suggest neurological modifications that enhanced human capacity for abstract thinking, symbolic manipulation, and long-term planning. The concept of cultural DNA, information patterns that replicate and evolve through cultural transmission systems, provides frameworks for understanding how contact events could create permanent changes in human identity. Ideas, technologies, and social institutions that prove adaptive can spread rapidly through populations, creating lasting modifications in human behavior and capability. If ancient contact events introduced superior organizational methods, technological concepts, or cognitive techniques, these innovations would become integrated into human culture in ways that persist across centuries. Modern neuroscience reveals that human consciousness operates through networks of neural activity that extend beyond individual brains. Mirror neuron systems create automatic copying of observed behaviors. Social cognition networks enable shared understanding across multiple minds. Collective intelligence phenomena emerge when groups coordinate their cognitive activities in ways that transcend individual limitations. These discoveries suggest that consciousness itself might be partially collective, that human identity includes shared components that connect individual minds to larger patterns of awareness. Could the Anunnaki contact events have operated through these collective consciousness mechanisms? Ancient texts describe divine inspiration not as mystical experience but as systematic information transfer that enhanced human cognitive capabilities. Modern understanding of neural plasticity, epigenetic inheritance, and social learning provides scientific contexts for understanding how such enhancement might operate through natural mechanisms that nevertheless produce results that seem supernatural from ancient perspectives. The persistence of Anunnaki narratives across cultures and centuries suggests that these stories address fundamental aspects of human identity that remain relevant despite technological and social changes. Each generation rediscovers in ancient texts insights that connect to contemporary questions about human nature, purpose, and potential. This isn't simple nostalgia or mythological thinking, but active engagement with information that continues to provide guidance for understanding human identity in cosmic contexts. Genetic studies of modern populations reveal that human diversity exceeds what would be expected from simple evolutionary models. Some genetic variants appear to have been under positive selection pressure, suggesting that they provide adaptive advantages in specific environments or circumstances. Other sequences show patterns of rapid spread that indicate recent origin and systematic distribution through populations. These genetic signatures might preserve evidence of ancient enhancement processes that modified human capabilities in ways that continue to influence modern human identity. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence often focuses on detecting signals from distant civilizations, but perhaps we should also look for evidence of contact within human genetic and cultural archives. If advanced beings once interacted with human populations, the evidence might be preserved not in radio signals from space, but in the biological and cultural inheritance systems that define human identity. We might be the message, living evidence of contact events that shaped our species in ways that continue to influence human development. Tonight, as we contemplate the layered nature of human identity, we recognize that we are simultaneously individuals and participants in larger patterns of consciousness that connect us to our ancestors, our contemporaries, and perhaps to forms of awareness that transcend purely human limitations. The question isn't whether gods created us from clay, but how consciousness learned to recognize itself in the mirror of existence, how awareness developed the capacity to question its own origins and imagine its future possibilities. In questioning ourselves, we hear the echoes of all who have wandered before us, and perhaps of those who guided that wandering toward purposes larger than any individual understanding that transcends the boundaries between myth and science, between memory and possibility, between the ancient voices that whisper across millennia and the modern minds that strain to hear their meaning in the silence of deep time. As we close this journey through the archives of clay and stone, through genetic memory and planetary records, through the mirrors of stars and the echoes of identity, we find ourselves not with answers, but with deepened appreciation for the questions themselves. The Anunnaki remain what they have always been, simultaneously myth and memory, symbol and possibility, ancient truth and eternal mystery wrapped in stories that resist final interpretation, while continuously offering new insights to each generation that encounters them. The archaeological evidence we've explored reveals patterns that challenge conventional timelines of human development. Sophisticated technologies appearing without apparent precursor stages, astronomical knowledge that exceeds what should have been possible with Bronze Age instruments, organizational capabilities that suggest access to institutional frameworks spanning continents and centuries, genetic signatures that imply population contacts and modifications that don't fit standard models of human migration and evolution. These aren't isolated anomalies, but components of a larger pattern that suggests human civilization developed through processes more complex than gradual independent innovation. Yet the scientific method requires skepticism, demands reproducible evidence, insists on explanations that fit within established theoretical frameworks. The Anunnaki hypothesis, that advanced beings once interacted with human populations, providing knowledge and guidance that shaped the course of civilization, remains unproven by conventional scientific standards. The evidence is suggestive but not conclusive, intriguing but not definitive, compelling but not complete. Perhaps this ambiguity is itself meaningful. The boundary between the known and unknown, between the proven and possible, serves essential functions in human consciousness. It maintains space for wonder, preserves room for imagination, keeps alive the recognition that current understanding might be incomplete. The Anunnaki stories function as guardians of this essential uncertainty, reminders that reality might extend beyond the limits of contemporary scientific knowledge. Modern physics has revealed that the universe operates according to principles that would have seemed magical to previous generations. Quantum entanglement creates instantaneous connections across cosmic distances. Parallel universe theories suggest infinite variations of reality existing simultaneously. Dark matter and dark energy comprise 95% of universal content yet remain essentially mysterious. Contemporary science consistently discovers that reality exceeds what previous paradigms considered possible. Perhaps the Anunnaki narratives point towards similar paradigm expansions yet to come. The wisdom preserved in these ancient stories might transcend their literal truth claims. They remind us that human consciousness exists within larger contexts, biological, planetary, cosmic, that influence our development in ways we don't fully understand. They suggest that intelligence operates on multiple scales, that awareness takes forms we haven't recognized, that communication occurs through channels we haven't learned to detect. They maintain possibilities for connection, guidance, and purpose that prevent human existence from becoming entirely isolated within purely materialist interpretations of reality. The institutional preservation of Anunnaki narratives across millennia suggests that these stories served functions beyond entertainment or religious instruction. They maintained technical knowledge through cultural catastrophes. They preserved astronomical data through periods of civilizational collapse. They encoded organizational principles that could be rediscovered when social conditions became appropriate. They functioned as time capsules, protecting essential information through the entropy of historical change. This preservation function continues into the present. Modern researchers studying ancient texts discover correlations with contemporary scientific findings that weren't apparent to previous generations. Astronomical references that make sense only in light of recent discoveries about stellar dynamics. Genetic descriptions that parallel modern understanding of hereditary mechanisms. Technological accounts that anticipate developments in materials science and engineering. The texts continue to yield new insights as human knowledge expands to encompass concepts that ancient peoples encoded in mythological vocabularies. The search for meaning in these narratives reflects deeper human needs that transcend academic curiosity. We seek understanding of our origins not just as biological species, but as conscious beings capable of wonder, creativity, and moral choice. We look for evidence of purpose in cosmic evolution, for signs that consciousness serves functions beyond mere survival, for connections that link individual existence to larger patterns of meaning and value. The Anunnaki stories address these fundamental needs while maintaining respectful uncertainty about ultimate truths that might exceed human comprehension. The silence that surrounds these ancient voices, the absence of clear contemporary evidence, the lack of unambiguous proof, the retreat of divine contact into mythological realms might itself carry meaning. Perhaps advanced beings withdraw their obvious presence precisely to preserve human autonomy, to allow natural development of consciousness and civilization without creating permanent dependency relationships. Perhaps the silence is intentional, designed to encourage independent growth while maintaining subtle guidance through preserved memories and encoded wisdom. Or perhaps the silence reflects natural cycles, cosmic seasons that bring different forms of consciousness into contact across vast temporal scales. Modern astronomy reveals that galactic environments change continuously, that stellar neighborhoods evolve, that planetary systems move through regions with different physical characteristics and different opportunities for communication and interaction. The ancient period of contact might represent a unique alignment of circumstances that won't recur for thousands of years, but whose memory serves essential functions during intervening periods. Tonight, as we reflect on this exploration of ancient mysteries and contemporary possibilities, we recognize that the true wisdom lies not in final answers, but in the quality of questions, not in certainty, but in openness to wonder, not in closure, but in the endless spiral of inquiry that connects each generation to the deepest sources of meaning and purpose. The Anunnaki remain what they have always been: mirrors for human questioning, guardians of cosmic possibility, voices calling from the depths of time to remind us that reality extends beyond current understanding, and that consciousness participates in mysteries larger than individual comprehension. Whether gods, visitors, or projections of collective human wisdom, they whisper still across the silence between stars, between moments, between the ancient clay tablets and the modern mind that reads them by lamplight, seeking in fragments of forgotten wisdom the keys to questions that define what it means to be human in a universe that dreams through conscious beings like ourselves. In the end, perhaps we are the answer to their ancient calling, the clay that learned to remember, the dust that discovered wonder, the children of earth and sky who carry forward the eternal dialogue between what is and what might yet be.